How's it going? Dave Comic Book Investments. So a lot of people watched my video where my dad is the head grader of PSA. That's right, PSA is coming out with their own comic book grading company to catch you up to speed. PSA is one of the oldest grading companies there is. They started grading coins and cards way back in the 90s. They dominate the card market. They're like 90%. They bought out one of their competitors, SGC, recently, so they literally own 90% of the grading card market. And so now they're jumping into grading comics. And my dad is now the head of the grading department. He basically is starting it from scratch. He's writing all the manuals. He's hiring all the people. He is basically the, I guess, not president, but the head of that division. And he's doing all that stuff. So a lot of people had a lot of questions when I interviewed him and we talked at length about it. And the number one question I got was, are you going to be submitting to PSA now? And so I'm just going to answer that question in this video. Before I do, if you want to win this book, the Spider-Man 300 head over to collectorscomics.com. That is my website. We have an auction going on right now, our featured auction number 11. We also have weekend auctions every weekend. Every Sunday we have an auction. But this is a big auction, bunch of stuff in there, AF-15s, Hulk 1s, Hulk 181s, whatever you want. If you want it, we have it as a giveaway. All you literally do have to click the button, enter a giveaway. That is pretty much it. Pretty easy, and you'll get this book for free. If you don't have an account, you have to sign up. But anyways, to the video. Will I be submitting to PSA? Because a lot of people are like, well, is that conflict of interest because your dad works there? I mean, he was the head grader at CBCS, and I didn't submit there. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's because your dad works there, conflict of interest, yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. Well, here's the thing. If I'm going to submit to PSA, CBCS, anyone but CGC, that all depends on you. That's right, on you guys, the people out there. I'm not beholden to any one grading company. There's no reason why I choose CGC over CBCS or anything like that, other than one fact, that that's what the customers demand. So if you are a customer and you demand that my book be in PSA, then I will use PSA. Like, what happens was when CBCS was kind of new, we switched over and we had this huge thing with CGC where they basically banned us, and then I was like, I had to get like lawyers involved and all this kind of stuff. It was all their fault. It was like I made a video all about it. And they kept my books and they wouldn't give them back to me. And it was like, that's why I had my lawyer send a letter like, you need to give them back, because it was a big, they basically gave one of my books, an Avengers 1, a 9.2, and they're like, whoops, we made a mistake. We're supposed to give it a 9.0. You have to send it back to us. And we're like, send it back to you? No, you graded it, because it was on the boards, and they were like, oh, no, we got to protect our image. We didn't do anything. We just sent it in. They gave us the grade. And someone else sent that book in later, and it ended up getting a 9.4. So the whole thing was stupid to begin with. And they wanted the book back, and since we said no, because I was like, well, you can buy it from us. And they're like, no, we won't. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to send you the book back. So then they held our other books. So it was like a big fiasco. And then they're like, well, you can't grade for 6 months. It was so weird. It was the old president. He was stupid. He was dumb. I talked to him on the phone at length before. He is an idiot. But anyways, that was before Matt Nelson. But nonetheless, it's up to, the reason why I use CGC is because when we used CBCS for a while during those like 6 months, now you could like argue one company's better in this area, one company's better. They all have their pros and cons. But what we found out is books were selling cheaper than if they're in the same grade as CGC. And I did a video at length about it recently, about how basically on average, if you have the exact same book in the exact same grade, you're going to get about 15% less if it's a CBCS book compared to a CGC. If it's PGX, it's even like 20 or 25% less than this in the exact same one. And also I did it on like different ages, so like Bronze Age, Copper Age, Modern. Once you get to the Modern, they're very similar. But the problem is I don't deal in too much Modern. And the Modern I do deal in is much higher end. And that's the issue. It's like I don't deal in a lot of, I have like $50 and $40 books that are graded, but majority of my books are hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And so when you take 15% away from that on every single book, it really adds up. Also, we ran into things that were taking longer to sell. CBCS was taking longer to sell compared to a CGC. We have metrics for all this kind of stuff. Also, another reason was customers would be like, yeah, I want your book, but can you send it into CGC first? If it gets the same grade, then I'll buy it. So I'm like, well, that defeats the whole purpose. So that's why I'm saying it's really up to you guys, the people out there. I am just a middleman. I am just a dealer. I'm not making these comic books. I'm not the grader. I'm not nothing. Basically, all I do is I facilitate deals. So I get in deals and I sell them to other people, vice versa. I'm also a consignment center. So if you ever have a consignments, I sell it in my auctions. But when I grade stuff, I'm using CGC. Like CGC, I would say if you added up all the companies, is definitely a better company than what we currently have. I will say that. But if the customers out there are clamoring for me to use PGX all the time, and if I got a CGC book, doesn't matter how great that company is, and people are like, I won't buy it because it's in a CGC holder. If you send it to PGX and it gets the same grade, sure, I'll buy it from then. Or if CGC was taking longer to sell and PGX was like the #1 book, like instantly flying off the shelves and no one would touch my CGC book, then yeah, I would go to PGX. And so when it comes back to this question, will I use PSA? It all comes down to the secondary market. And I talked, as you guys know, I was in meetings with PSA before they ever launched and stuff like that to consult with them and basically give them my insight and things like that. And literally half of my conversations with them was you will never be successful unless you're able to get the same prices on the secondary market. And I told him, I was like, look, you will be CBCS 2.0. You will never gain any market share is if someone grades a PSA book and it sells for less than if it was in the same grade as a CGC holder, because all people are going to do is they're going to buy it and crack it out, send it to CGC, and then now you don't have this label. This is your advertising, right? This is CGC's advertising. If every person is buying PSA, cracking them out, sending it to CGC so they can get a better price, then you grade that book, you put out your label, your name in there, and now people crack it out and put a CGC. So your advertising is gone. Your label is gone, like out of the secondary market. And you'll never be able to get hold of anything. And they should know this better than anything because they control 90% of the card market. There's a reason why for that. So one of the issues when I was talking to them, I felt like they thought their name was so big that they would just come out of the gates and everyone would trust them and they would get the same prices as CGC, right? Because let's say CGC is like the gold standard. They thought their name, and I don't know if their name, I know it's big in cards and it's been like that for decades, but I don't know, does that translate to comics instantly? I don't know. It remains to be seen. Because Beckett was into cards and they own CBCS and that didn't turn out very well. So I really don't know. I don't know. So if that's going to work for them, I talked to them at length about it. I was like, look, this will be your main hump to get over, is making sure that you get good prices. Because if you don't, no one will end up using you. I won't use you. Other dealers won't use you. No dealer will use you because it's like, why would I send in a book that's worth $1,000 in a CGC case? It's quicker to sell, gets a better price, all this kind of stuff, just to send in a PSA and it sells for $900 compared to CGC $1,000. I told them, I was like, it doesn't matter if your grading is cheaper. If your grading is like, oh, we're $5 cheaper to grade, or $10 or $100, you could be free. You could be free grading service, but if you don't get high enough prices, no one will use you. So, and also, if the customers don't want it, if the customers are telling me, crack it out, send it to CGC, and then I'll consider buying it, that tells me I can't use them. I'm not, just because my dad works there doesn't mean I have this instant, bond where I have to use them, or like I'm going to get some kind of benefit using them. Even if I'm not getting any benefit, but even if I did, even if they said, you know what, David, all your grading will be free, all of it. It still wouldn't be beneficial if they're just like CBCS and it takes longer to sell and they go for cheaper prices. And just like, no, it's not even worth it for me. So that's why I say it's up to you guys, is because the people out there, I just go where the people want me to go. I am a dealer for facilitating deals for people. And if the customers are saying, look, we want CGC, then I have to use CGC. That's why I use CGC, because I have a business and I have a business to run, and that's what the customers are asking for. I can't be sending my stuff to PGX because nothing would sell, nothing would move. Everyone would think I'm shady, like, why is he sending to PGX? What's wrong with his books? Because people know that PGX is bad. It's just bad. And I know people are like, oh, I had a great experience with PGX. I'm like, yeah, you have some modern stuff, but that are like 50, maybe $100 books, but that's not what I sell. You know, I sell fantasy 15s and things like that. Things are worth tens of thousands of dollars. So I need to have that trust in there. It's like, if you saw a fantasy 15, 50 grand, and it's a PGX label, what would you think instantly? You're like, great. What's wrong with that book? Is it restored? Is there a coupon miss in there that they missed out? Did the person that owns the company grade it himself so he can get a better grade? I'm gonna have to see it in person. And I'm gonna kind of have to crack it out just to see and make sure it's all there. So like all that trust is gone. That's with PGX. With CBCS, you know, it's not the same. Like you can trust them that, you know, it isn't restored and there's nothing missing and stuff like that. But again, it comes down to the fact that you're gonna get a less of a price. There's a good example of this, of like a Hulk 181 that sold maybe like 6 months ago, a 9.8. And it sold for like 60% or 70% of the price of a CGC one. So imagine you have a Hulk 181 9.8 in a CBCS and a CGC. They sold right around the same time, and it sold for like astronomically less. Like no one's gonna use you then, because it's like, why would I send in my Hulk 181 and 9.8 when it's just gonna go for a fraction of the price of a CGC book? So that's kind of like my answer is like, will I use it? Yeah, I'm going to use it to test them out in the beginning, make some content and see how they do. You know, obviously give them a real try and see how they sell. See, you know, what kind of prices they get, if they take longer to sell, if people actually want them. You know, so I'm not against, you know, trying them out. But in terms, just because my dad works there, doesn't mean I'm going to use them permanently. They have to earn my business. And the way they earn my business is they have to convince me and convince others that they're just as good and they'll get the same prices and sell just as fast as CGC, and the customers won't care because they're coming from a card mindset. In the card world, people don't really care. It's like, oh, PSA, BCCG, which is Beckett, or SGC. You know, there's all these different grading companies, and they're like, oh, whatever. It's, you know, kind of all the same. They don't really. It's not the same as comics. Comics, they're CGC, and then that's it. So I don't know. So I don't know if I'm going to use them. I'll definitely use it, give them a test run and see how they do, and see how and go from there and see if it's worth it. But again, just because my dad works there does not make it like an instant, yeah, I'm going to use them all the time and I'm going to be a shill for them or whatever. No, I'm very honest and very open. If you watch the interview, you know, my dad would say something and I'd be like, I totally disagree with that. That statement right there, I don't think that's the way to go, but you know, not my business, not my problem. So I'm happy he's happy at his job, of course. So, and I'll definitely give him a fair shake and try my best to make sure they succeed in any way I can, but that does not guarantee that I will be using them. And I wish them the best. And I hope that they do good. And I hope, you know, that over time or even out of the gate, they're just as good as CGC. And, you know, this whole conversation won't matter. It will basically be, you know, CGC, PSA, they're the same. They go over the same price. Makes no difference. But that will remain to be seen, and we'll see how that goes. So, one more thing. Have a great day.